but it's 7:31 or so I think we'll get started. I'm Mark Lee, one of the raspy organizers of 1 Million Cups, Hopkins County, and I want to welcome you. Excuse me. This morning we have a real treat. Mark, you are a Dawson Springs native, aren't you?
Yes, originally from Dawson Springs.
Very good, very good. Mark Wayne Adams is our speaker today, and he's not only an entrepreneur, but his field is he's a creator of award-winning books of all different types. And as I'm sure he'll tell you, MWA Inc. authors have won many, many book awards and continue to create new products annually. And I think he'll talk a little about the Dawson Springs connection as well. So with that, welcome to him as well as you all.
Now they told me I get a full hour, so believe me, I will use this hour. I usually, when I have a presentation, I will talk a little bit and I'll listen. So throughout this process, if you have questions, just raise your hand. Now if you start to yell out, you know, like my wife yells at me sometimes, I probably won't listen to you. But if you raise your hand, you'll get my attention. Now if I could get her to raise her hand, she'd definitely get my attention. So, but we'll have a lot of fun this morning. I am an artist. When I was a kid, I would do this. People would tap me on the shoulder and go, "You're awesome." What? You have a gift. I'm like, what? Are you kidding? This is a curse. I can't put this thing down. Now as a kid, I was always wondering what everyone else saw in me. And that's the part I'm going to talk about today, because standing in front of you guys, most of my audience and my fans are about this tall. I do picture books. I've illustrated over almost 50 picture books. After this year, there'll be over 50. Those picture books have won over 50 different picture book awards in the past 6 years. And I do public speaking in elementary schools. I travel for about 4 months out of every year. Most of it's here in Kentucky. And I see about 90,000 students every year. So how did I get from Dawson Springs, Kentucky, where I was awesome, where I had a gift, where I thought I was cursed? Well, it kind of all started with the community around me. Now, I didn't have an entrepreneurial group to support me. My parents had 4 kids. I had 16 aunts and uncles. Each one had 4 kids. You can do the number. I was kind of lost in the middle of this mass of people. But there was one thing that always stood out about me, and it was this. From the day my mom gave me one of these and I put it on paper, she would say, "Wow, are you kidding me? It was just scribbles." So I learned to draw a heart. And my dad would pick me up every time I would give it to him. And he'd give me a hug. I'm like, I didn't say a word, and this man just physically picks me up and squeezes me as tight as he can. So I knew I had some sort of power with this, but it was the same power every boy and girl and all of you have. Because if you write a heart and you hand it over to your spouse, the first thing they're going to do is smile. They're going to go, all right. No matter what we're arguing about, it's all over with because you love me. So I learned that this thing wasn't about me. It was about how I made other people feel. So just to give you an example, what is this?
Mermaid.
Mermaid? Okay. You can shout out now. What's that?
Car.
What is it really? And that's the thing about this. Everybody thinks they see something that really it isn't. Because this paper. Okay? So a blind person, all they hear is paper. All they feel is paper. Okay? So when I was a kid, I had this power that I could turn this stuff into anything you wanted. And I didn't know that that's what the gift was. So as an entrepreneur, something really cool happened in the 3rd grade. Whenever I told my friend that I wanted to become an artist, he said, "Never gonna happen." What? Are you kidding me? Dawson Springs, Kentucky. There are no artists, you probably won't be one. Now, kids hear this all the time. And I know this because I see about 90,000 of them, and they're like, I got a friend just like that. So whenever I tell the story, the first thing I did was I gave up. I went to my classroom and I threw down my pen, and there was my teacher, Mr. Leckie, and he said, Mark, you love to draw. Why are you never going to draw again? Well, I told my friend my dream. He says it's never going to happen. He said, well, you can tell me. I'm like, oh, no, because you're my teacher. I know you'll laugh. So I told him, and he laughed. And then he said, well, there's this book in the library about this guy named Walt Disney. Read it, and you'll know an artist. My mom was a librarian, so I went straight down to the library, read the whole thing in one night, came back, and here comes my best friend. And he goes, hey, Mark, what's up? I'm going to be an artist. I know somebody. He's like, well, who do you know? I'm like, I know Walt Disney. He's like, everybody knows Walt Disney. Walt Disney, I knew him better than anyone. Walt Disney lived on a farm? I lived on a farm. Walt Disney had a pet pig? I could get one. Okay? Now, my friend says, well, you may know Walt Disney, but you'll never be an artist. What? He said, you'll never be an artist because you don't draw like Walt Disney. Duh, I am in the 3rd grade. How am I going to draw like Walt Disney? So I went to my classroom, I threw down my pen, and here comes Mr. Leckie again. Mark, didn't you read the book? Yes, I read the book. He said, well, what's the problem? I don't draw like Walt Disney. Well, he laughed at me again. And he says, your mom's still a librarian, right? I'm like, well, duh, it's been a day. He said, there's this book down at the library about how to draw any one of Walt Disney's characters. If you check it out, I bet by the end of the weekend, you will be able to draw one. So I went straight to the library, I checked out the book, grabbed one of these, and one of these, this, and I spent all weekend, because the book said if I do this, they say, this, no. By Sunday morning, I could practically do this in my sleep, because the book says if you do all these things, you will end up with one of these. So on Monday morning, I come into school, and I am waiting for my best friend. Oh my gosh, I cannot wait for that kid. So he comes walking up to me, and I do this. And he goes, wow, that looks just like Walt Disney drew it. I said, I know. I'm going to be an artist. And he looks at it, and he goes, no, you're not. What? Now, when I ask kids in elementary school if they know anybody like that, they're like, yes, he's right there. So, adults really don't point fingers, but they'll cut their eyes and they're like, I know that person. So when I looked at my friend, I said, I know Walt Disney. I draw like Walt Disney. Why will I never be an artist? And he said the same thing that most every person in the whole wide world who was scared would say. You'll never make any money. I started to wind it up, and this kid goes, whoa, what are you doing? I'm going to throw it away. I'll never make any money. He said, I'll pay you 50 cents. Sold. Oh, yes. Shiny. So no sooner than I sold my first drawing, some kid taps me on the shoulder. It's a 5th grader. I slide my money in my pocket because I didn't know what they were up to. He says, dude, did you draw that picture for that kid? I said, yes, I did. He said, would you draw one for me? For 50 cents. He said, I only have $1. I have no change, I said. So another kid taps me on the shoulder and he says, will you draw a picture for me, Mark? I'm like, sure, I'll draw a picture, 50 cents. He said, I only have 10. I'll take it. All day long, and my very first day of entrepreneurship, I spent drawing pictures for people. It wasn't just Mickey, it was whatever they wanted, I gave it to them, and they would pay me. Now, when I showed up at my house and we were wealthy, we had a 600 square foot out in Christian County, a 600 square foot house out in Christian County, and when I walked in the house, I had pockets full of jingly stuff and crinkly stuff. And when my mom saw me, she said, Mark Wayne Adams, what did you do? Because if I had money, I did something wrong. So I said, Mom, I drew pictures for the kids at school and they paid me money. She said, that's their lunch money. Are you kidding? Take it all back. And so I went back to school. So they had money and pictures, and I had nothing. And all of a sudden, one of the kids' moms taps me on the shoulder. And she says, Mr. Adams, did you draw this for my son? I'm like, oh. I said, yes, I did. She said, great. Do you think you can make a really big one for me? Make it all in color? She said, I love Mickey Mouse. I'll pay you 25 bucks. Let me talk to my mom. So I went home and I said, Mom, she wants to pay me $25. She said, you take as much money from adults as you want, never take money from kids. Now, ask any one of my authors, I take a nice chunk of money, but that's not what I learned in the 3rd grade. I learned about friends, okay? And I learned there are 2 kinds of friends in the world. There are uninspiring friends, like my best friend, and I can't remember that kid's name. No, still can't remember his name. I learned that uninspiring friends are the kind of people that when you're thirsty, they say, no, you're not. I'm hungry. No, you're not. I'm going to go home. No, you're not. So when you say you're going to do something that they have no clue what it is, the first thing they say is, no, you're not. Now, I also learned about inspiring friends. Who in here knows what my elementary school teacher's name was? Just raise your hand. Anyone?
Leaky.
There you go. Mr. Lucky. Exactly.
Oh,
How can this man remember my elementary school teacher's name? Well, I'll tell you. He was inspiring. I can remember so many inspiring people's names because Mr. Lucky didn't come to my house and read the book to me, and he didn't tuck me into bed at night and go, you can do this. All he said was when I said, how? He said, it's right over there, go get it, that's what you want. And I learned that not only did I have one inspiring friend, I had an entire school of inspiring friends. Because once I told people what my special gift was, they would all come up and tap me on the shoulder in middle school. Are you an artist? No, I'm not an artist. Did you draw a picture today? No, you should, because you'll never be an artist if you don't do that. So then I get to high school. Are you an artist? No, I'm not an artist. So now when I see people, most everyone I see in Dawson Springs goes, I knew you'd do it. How'd you know I was going to do it? I didn't even know what I was going to do. But everyone who meets me says, I knew you would do this. So, now you know a little bit about me and Dawson Springs and my ties. And that's why every time I come home, Dawson Springs is home. If you meet me in Orlando and you say, where's home? I go, Dawson Springs, Kentucky. And they're like, where is that? And I'm like, greatest place in the world to grow up. It was. Now, there are a lot of people who have different experiences. And it doesn't matter where you grow up. It's the community that raises you. And I found that not only did I have inspiring friends in school and in teachers and in parents, but I also had it with bankers and lawyers and almost anyone who I ever met. If I asked a good question, I learned that I met an inspiring friend. For example, goals. Anybody in here have a goal? Yeah? It's okay, don't be afraid. You're not in middle school, no one's going to point at you and go, ooh. Because middle schoolers do this. When I talk to middle schoolers, they go, not raising my hand. No matter what you're selling, I don't know what you're giving away, I am not raising my hand. And adults do the same thing. But if I were to ask a kindergartner if they had a goal, you would think they had to go to the bathroom. They would be like, me, pick me. But after you get to middle school, that changes. So I learned in high school this thing about goals. Now, I was not a public speaker in high school. All right, I was scared to death. This was me when I had to read my senior paper that I wrote, so I knew everything that was on it. My arms got tense. I started to bead up with sweat. My teacher looked at me and says, do you need a drink? And I'm like, she goes, go sit down. I went right over to that. I never read my senior paper because I was so terrified of people. Now, in high school, I was also required not only to write that paper, but to write a list of goals. 10 things that I wanted to achieve in my life. Okay? And I won't go through every single one, but 10 things. So I went home and I wrote this list, and my teacher had one rule. She said, the last thing I want you to put on this list is one ridiculous thing you think will never happen. Now, I lived in Dawson Springs all my life, and I never left hardly for any reason. And I thought we lived on an island. Has anyone been in Dawson Springs before? Okay. There's a bridge to go out of town this way, a bridge to go out of town this way, a bridge to go out of town this way. We live on an island, and that's what I thought. Somehow that river just wraps around there, and there's this giant moat that the only way you can get off is if you go over the bridge. So, my goals list, when I handed this in, the first thing I said was I wanted to graduate from high school. About 50% of my aunts and uncles did not. So if I graduated from high school, I would be smarter than half my family. Okay. So that's why I put that on there. And my English teacher said, that's such an easy thing to do. Sometimes it's not. For some people, it is a very difficult thing to do. If you're not attractive, people make it very difficult for you to graduate from high school. How do I know that? Braces, Lasix, and a lot of working out made this, okay? In high school, I was not the person I am today. So it is difficult to graduate from high school for many different people. So I put also that I wanted to go to college and graduate. The reason I wanted to graduate from college because if I did it, I would be smarter than everyone in my family because I'd be the first one. So already, I knew that those things needed to happen for me, just so I would feel like I was completing who I was. Not everybody has to do this. I know some really rich people who never graduated from high school, and they are super smart and so talented. Let's see here. Graduate high school, college. Oh, I wanted to marry the girl of my dreams. Now, when I handed this in, my girlfriend at the time went, ah. It wasn't her, okay? I've been married for 17 years to a CPA. She is challenging and difficult, but man, she is the girl of my dreams. Now, what else did I put on here? I wanted to fly in a plane. The reason I wanted to fly in a plane was because if I was in an airplane, I wasn't in Dawson Springs anymore. I actually had left the state. So, I also said I wanted to work for Disney. Wanted to be a graphic designer. Let's see here, a couple other things. Own a house and one other thing. Oh, convertible. Oh, I can't forget convertible. All right. So all of these things I had done up until I was about 25 years old. Now the last thing on my list, and I had been carrying this in my wallet the entire time. Like I would pull it out and go, all right, only 2 more to go, and I'll be done. So the last thing was to meet, I cannot even spell his name, so. All right, wanted to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now in the 80s, late 80s, if you knew Arnold Schwarzenegger, if you'd even talked to Arnold Schwarzenegger, you would be like, oh, you know Schwarzenegger. So, I am working at Walt Disney World as a lifeguard. My uniform is about this big, okay? My name tag is almost as big as a uniform, all right? At the time, I was a marathon runner, and so I was working out in a health club, and I had my journal, and I'm drawing my journal, and all of a sudden, I look up, and there's this giant arm, and I lean over, and I see this man going, boom. I'm like, it's Arnold. They were opening Planet Hollywood there at Walt Disney World. So I look at him, and I'm going, yes! And then I think, no.